So, um, what are these, can you elaborate a little bit more maybe on what level, one and level two might look like? Like, what's the difference there?
So I think if maybe we come up with a task list that says, if you're comfortable in Google Docs, creating forms, making assignments, then you probably should go to level two. If you're brand new to all of this Google stuff, you probably ought to go to level one. So
Okay.
maybe we can give them a small list of things to look at, to just make a self-assessment of whether or not they can, which one they should go to.
Okay, so we'll create a task list. We can do that here in a little while, once we get through this professional development plan. But, and that will determine, so each staff member will fill that out beforehand, and then that determines what session they go to.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So that kind of covers Google Classroom. Anything else with Google Classroom that we might need to?
Maybe like, so each teacher looks the same. So if a kid goes from one teacher to the next, a guide on how each teacher should set it up. So if they're at home learning when they go from one class to the next, it's similar.
Very good, I like that. That's gonna be important for our students.
The students with the parents too.
Maybe a
You know,
cohesive, layout, yeah, that's good.
Okay. That's a great idea. I think that will be, pretty structured. We need structure with all of this so that everybody can follow it. Okay, what else do we have for professional development for our teachers? We've got Google Classroom, and that's big. I think that's probably the main one, since that's the LMS that we're gonna be working on and that the students are gonna be working on from home. But what about maybe some instructional strategies that, technology can help with, since, our teachers are gonna be teaching asynchronous with our virtual students?
Probably some type of video platform that we choose. I think we have Screencastify, so they need to know how to video. They need maybe some guidance on how long those should be and how to post them.
Okay. So, what would that look like for a teacher if they're developing a lesson and they're using Screencastify? Like, can you give me an example, maybe?
Sure. So say that they're gonna go over some notes in class. Well, instead of the same notes that they would go over, they're just gonna record their screen while they're doing it so that they can have that for their virtual learners too.
And just hearing it explained, because you can provide the notes, as an attachment in Google Classroom, but if the child's just reading them, they may not be able to fully understand what you mean, and using Screencastify, you can elaborate on those notes.
You can also put your face in there so they can feel like they're at least there with you. So they're building a relationship along with getting the lesson. They're seeing you point to things or talk about things.
Which really brings me to you because, of our special education population and our ESL, because as of right now, we've taken that survey to see who is planning to go virtual, and a lot of that population is choosing to be virtual. So that's gonna be, a challenge for our teachers, like to continue to teach those students and make sure they're getting all their accommodations. So that would be an excellent way to do that. Do we have any other ideas as far as reaching that population if they're virtual? Like what we can do to help our teachers to make sure they're getting accommodations? Maybe just, because let's just say this, we have a special ed student that's on our campus, okay? And he leaves the classroom and he goes to Content Mastery for help. Well, how are we going to do that?
Well, we have Zoom. We can have an open Zoom link, or they're gonna have to learn how to reach out to receive the help. What is it, Google Hangouts?
Google Hangouts, it's another Google Meet.
Google Meet.
Hangouts.
So maybe we could come up with an office hour time that they can be available to those students.
Did the district talk about doing a virtual hour where, if they needed the additional help?
And so our students are doing well, our teachers are doing well, we're now at the end of the year. So it's time to just reflect on everything that we've done. It was a whirlwind, it went really fast. We had to come together quickly and put things in place quickly. And so we want to talk about all of that, but first I want to talk about our team. Not everybody's here today, but we had a great collaborative team that was always willing to contribute and work hard and be culture builders on our campus. And so, like, I wanted to ask you, what do you think we learned as a team about each other, about ourselves as a team? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that we had to learn to be flexible. That was huge, and some of us are more prone to being flexible and some not. Anytime you're planning for a school year, you really like to have that plan in place. But because the state, TEA's guidance was such that with the situation of being COVID, students had options up until right before school started. So that forced us all to be so flexible, and we had to have multiple plans based on what routes these students chose. And so it was very messy, and I don't think any of us really like to start school messy, but we really just had to embrace some flexibility and just stay positive through it all, because it was pretty frustrating.
Definitely, I would agree with that 100%, because especially at the very beginning of the school year, TA was consistently coming out with different criteria for school districts, and that impacted our virtual learners. And so I know there was a lot of frustration on our teachers' end because our virtual learners, a lot of them were failing. We noticed that they're just not logging into their LMS and doing their work, so they're not checking in for attendance, they're not submitting their work. And so we had to adjust, we had to make adjustments through that, and I think that as a team we did really well with that, coming together, collaborating, and coming up with a plan for that. We did eventually get most of those learners back on campus, and so they're doing better. But I agree, I think flexibility was a huge part, and I think we all worked really well together with that. I think you have to be flexible anytime you're addressing an issue.
I agree.
So, okay, well, I want to talk about you because I know you worked at the district level with this plan, but you also contributed to my collaborative team here on campus implementing our plan, and I just want to appreciate you for all of your work and time that you have helped us with, because it would not have been as smooth without you, so I appreciate that. But so during this process, your professionalism, you're very professional. You always held yourself to a high level. You never let your emotions get to you. You just always tackled everything and just kept your cool with everything. And so I think that impacted the entire team as well. So you always had a positive attitude. So with all of that, with me telling you that, how do you feel that you've grown through this process?
Well, I think just being able to reflect back and look, anytime you do something new for the first time, there are things that you would want to do differently looking back on it. So being able to do that is huge, and know that you could improve. So we definitely spent a lot of time reflecting on how we could have done things better. And then just personally, I feel like communication can always be improved on. So I've probably wanted to have communicated even better, maybe multiple times. It was all so new. So perhaps that one email that you send maybe needed to go out a couple of times with reminders and things. So I think I could have improved on my communication.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you said that, because reflecting upon myself, that was the number one thing that I felt like I could improve upon as well. I just feel like everything just happened so quickly, and so we had to just really work quickly and implement quickly and adjust quickly, that the communication we almost assumed that people should just know this stuff,
Right.
and looking back, that was not the case.
Right.
So for me, I wish I could have, been a little bit more organized and had more structures in place,
Right.
you know? Even though it happened so quickly and so fast, I still should have taken more time to
Sure.
make detailed, instructions and communication for everybody, so the plan could have gone smoother. It
Right.
worked, it worked,
Right.
and we did what we could, but I think it could have been improved, for
I
sure.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, what about, I mean, I feel like there were several challenges along the way. So let's reflect on those challenges and see, you know, maybe how we could improve upon those going forward.
Sure. I think the biggest challenge was that because of COVID and the way that it was progressing or not progressing, you just didn't know if it was going to be worse or better. And so because of that, the option to be a virtual student was allowed much later than if you were truly going to plan for virtual instruction. You would get that commitment way sooner so that you could schedule those kids with certain teachers or certain classes. But because they could choose to go virtual up until the very last minute and even throughout the school year, that meant that the virtual learners were just sprinkled in amongst all of the teachers' classes, which made all of our teachers have to be duo teachers. And that is just not ideal. It's not ideal for the teacher, it's not ideal for the student receiving the instruction, and that is definitely not how we would have liked to have set it up, but our hands were tied in that. And so then the second challenge became, how do we prepare our teachers to be able to do two jobs well and serve these students? And you know, if you have 3 weeks on your mark, set, go, you know,
Right.
so that, to me, that was the biggest challenge. So if we were to ever do it again and it wasn't a COVID situation, we could spend a lot more time on the planning end, because I truly believe that planning, the more planning you can do, the more smooth that it's gonna go for the teachers and the students. So those are the challenges I saw.
Yeah, for sure, and myself being on the campus every day, definitely saw that teachers were overwhelmed from the beginning, because especially our teachers that strive to do the best every single day, and so they're almost killing themselves because they were teaching their in-person students during the day and then going home at night and recording themselves teaching a lesson to post for their virtual students. And so they're working all day and they're going home and doing all of that, and so they were wearing themselves out. So
Sure.
they quickly figured out, I can't continue at this pace, and so it's just trying to adjust. And once they figured out that it's okay, you know, to do it this way,
Right.
and to let go of some things, you know, they just needed
For
to let
sure.
go, decide what they needed to let go of, because it was just too much. And so I felt like, and then of course that's not conducive for our kids either.
Right.
There was a lot of frustrations on our students' ends that were virtual. And so I think, reflecting back, if we could have just tightened up a little those loose ends and just made it more conducive to the teacher and to the student,
Yes.
it would have worked out better.
Well, and also I know we've talked about this too, if we could have required that every student come to an orientation of some sorts where they had to learn where to go for their classes, but because of COVID, we couldn't require families to come into an in-person. So we made videos, but we don't know if they were watched. And so, you know, there was just a lot of messiness that we could have avoided. There are also a lot of really good things that, looking back, I'm really grateful that our team decided, like we had at one time talked about switching our LMS in the summer, but our
wow.
teachers weren't trained on that, our students weren't trained on that. And even though the LMS itself was a little more conducive to virtual learning in terms of tracking engagement, that's always hard to track, it would have just been a whole nother curveball. And so there were some things that I feel like our teachers, even though they were overwhelmed and even though it was a ton of work, I think they were able to actually do it because you know, we didn't make those big changes last minute. So there were some things that I'm glad that we decided as a team to keep.
Yeah, and you know, overall, reflecting back, I feel like we did the best we could with the circumstances. So you can always make improvements, but overall, through the second semester